review some of the things we've learned in really an epitome on the year's teachings on the temple. We've had a couple of brief articles in the April 1st and 15th Watchtowers that summarize matters for us. We may even wish to turn to them. We're certainly welcome to do that. At page 221, let's first have someone tell us what is the spiritual temple before we get into types and antitypes. What is the spiritual temple? All right, Brother Harris, please.
Well, the spiritual temple is Jehovah God's arrangement for worship.
All right. When did this spiritual temple come into existence? Brother Sawyer?
It came into existence when Jesus was baptized.
What year was that, and how so? Why that year, Brother Brown?
This was AD 29, because at that time there was someone to occupy the temple, or really the courtyard of the temple. So from that time forward, all the arrangements for the spiritual temple and all the working out of where Jesus would go after this was all set up and decided upon.
Now, Jesus himself, it says, was the one who came to make a sacrifice on the spiritual altar. Now, the altar was in the middle of the courtyard. Who'd like to explain what the altar was, and then we'll ask what the courtyard was. If you want to answer both, that's all right. Yes, Sister Harris?
The altar was God's will that he would accept a perfect human sacrifice to pay the ransom price for mankind.
All right, and when was he in the courtyard? Brother in the back.
Well, he was in the courtyard of the temple from 29 up until his death of 33 CE.
Now, we have a very interesting point here. While he was in the courtyard, could be seen of men, isn't it so that the priests who worked at the temple went into the holy place, not the Holy of Holies, but in the holy compartment to minister to the high priest? How can it, where they were not seen by persons? How would there be a comparison there in the work of Jesus and the anointed priests with him? Sister Nelson?
The fact that Jehovah God accepted him after his baptism in a spiritual sense, he knew then that he would enter back into the heavens, but the people around him didn't know this, but he had a revelation to that effect.
So it was the beginning by the Spirit, wasn't it? Do any of us see an anointing on the anointed? No, that's a very personal matter. We see their work in the courtyard, ministering, but we don't see them in the holy place, or in other words, their calling. There's no physical manifestation of that. That is personal between Jehovah and them. Now, in the holy place, there was a lampstand and showbread. What did this picture in our time? It's Sister Bennett.
The lampstand would picture the spiritual light that we have today, and then the showbread would picture the spiritual food that we receive, and then, of course, the incense would picture the prayers from the Holy Ones.
Very good. Now, the Atonement Day, Jesus went into the Holy of Holies. In what way? In fact, he went in there quite often in a particular way before he died. Just like the high priest on earth would go into the Holy of Holies, only he. How, in a sense, was Jesus permitted into the Holy of Holies when he was on the earth, Sister Harris?
Jesus was tested when he was on earth, and under all these tests, he maintained integrity.
All right, and Brother Harris?
Well, the high priest, in going into the most holy, went 3 times. One time was to take the censers with the hot coals and put incense upon it. And this would picture the fact that Jesus Christ, using hot coals, well, that's well, during his lifetime, he was under fire, persecution, pressure. So then that was a picture, foreshadowed how Jesus Christ maintained his integrity while he was under test when he was on earth.
Something else on that? Was there any other way he was in the Holy of Holies, even while he was on the earth? Brother Sawyer?
Well, being in the Holy of Holies, it was screened off, and you couldn't see in there. So Jesus was screened off from the people outside, in that they couldn't see what he was doing, but he could. He was spiritually begotten.
All right, that's the holy place. And when he went into prayer with his Father, he certainly ascended into the Holy of Holies, didn't he? Something else on that we may find interesting. When the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, the Bible gives no record of this, but the Society has taught this in times past in Gilead, and it is verified by Hebrew scholars, that when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, he had a rope tied around his heel. Can anyone guess as to why? Yes, Sister Brown?
This was in case he died, that he could be took out of there, since no one else could enter in it.
Yes, no one could get in there, they would die. So if the high priest went in and died, who was going to get him? Well, they had the rope around his heel, and they would pull him out then by the rope if he should perhaps die in the Holy of Holies, and then they would not desecrate the presence of God by their own defiled flesh without being a high priest themselves. Now, the Holy of Holies was separated by a curtain. How did Jesus, once and for all time, enter into the Holy of Holies, into the very presence of God? Sister Furnace?
He did this when he died and gave up his fleshly human body.
Very good. They ripped through that curtain of flesh and went to the heavens with his God Jehovah. Now, will the courtyard, will the sanctuary